Yes,
Yay!
what is up, everybody? Happy Monday. Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 217. We're getting up there.
We are.
Yeah. Big show tonight. So, Western States, obviously, the iconic 100-mile race, ultra marathon, took place just a couple weekends ago. Last weekend, our guest was female champ Courtney Dauwalter. If you haven't seen that show, go watch it. Tonight, we have a legend on who also ran Western States last year, as well as multiple other times. I believe 12 other times. This was his 13th finish at Western States. He ran in 94. Can you believe that? 24 years ago. Is that math right? Let's not do math. I got a beer in front of me. But yeah, nearly 24 years ago, Dean Karnazes ran Western States 100 and then ran it multiple times after that and then returned to this year. I believe it was 9 years since his last shot at Western States. We'll talk to him more specifically about some of the dates and how it's changed and stuff. But tonight, we've got Dean Karnazes, the ultramarathon man, the legend, joining us on tonight's show. I'm extremely excited about this. So grab your beverage of choice, sit back, relax. Here we go, everyone. Welcome to Ginger Runner Live. It's going to be a good one. Let's get started now.
Ginger Runner.
Yes.
Yay.
Welcome, everybody, to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 217. 216 episodes came before this. Can you believe it? We've been doing this for
That's pretty crazy.
years now.
A lot of Mondays.
A lot of Mondays have been dedicated to this show, but that's because we love it, and we appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy Mondays to join us as well. Talking about all things running, ultra running, and stuff like that. Very recently, the Western States 100 took place. It's a 100-mile race, pretty much the first 100-mile race between Squaw and Auburn in California. It's iconic. It is extremely difficult. It gets very hot. We've talked about it on the show multiple times over the years. Last week's guest, the female champion, Courtney Dauwalter, told us all about what it was like this year to be out there. And our guest tonight is going to tell us all about what it was like for him. And it sounds like it was not a very pleasant experience this year. I don't want to spoil anything. He managed to get it done, but I have a feeling there are some stories involved. Our guest is Dean Karnazes, one of the guy that got me into ultra running, and I think gets a lot of people into this sport.
There are a lot of Dean fans in the chat room tonight.
Like, if you're in this sport, you are a Dean fan because there's this guy's influence on the sport. It's obvious. So it's awesome to have him back on the show. It's been a long time since we had him on the show. We're going to catch up on what he's been up to, but more specifically Western States and maybe what's next. He's also got tons of books to talk about and stuff. Before we introduce Dean, of course, we have some individuals to thank for allowing us to do Ginger Runner Live each and every week, live every Monday. And those are our Patreon supporters. Of course, we have a number of Patreon supporters that contribute on a monthly basis, have been here for a long time, for years, supporting us, helping this show happen. 3 individuals at the top tier, big shout outs to them week in and week out. Mr. Chris Lee from Hong Kong, he puts a bunch of events together, also is showcasing the trails in Hong Kong. He has an organization called Trailblazer. They do great things for the community there. If you find yourself in Hong Kong or want to race some incredible events, definitely check out the region and reach out to the Trailblazer community. Chris and his whole team are just incredible supporters of this show, and it's really cool to have that connection. Rick Bjarnason from British Columbia. Rick and his team at cheekymonkeymedia.ca. They're a web design company. They're currently redoing the gingerrunner.com website. That spicy little number should be up here very, very soon. I believe 2 weeks. Very, very cool. And he is currently prepping for Sinister 7 and Fat Dog 120.
He's running some of the toughest stuff in Canada.
Super tough. And I just talked to him last week about Sinister 7, which is coming. I mean, it's coming up like a week, maybe 2 weeks. He's very, very close to running this event. So we'll catch up with Rick once he completes that thing. Very excited about that. And finally, Brian Sands, longtime supporter of the show. Brian ran his first marathon last October, is currently training for his first 50K, has lost over 100 pounds in his journey. Just an incredibly inspiring individual who I will say has something to give back to the community. He and I just talked last week.
Right.
We're probably going to mention it in the post show today or next week, but Brian is like so inspired by those who view this show and who are part of this community that he wants to give back, and it's a pretty cool little prize. We'll be talking about that in the coming weeks. So big shout out to Brian. All right, without further ado, our guest is taking some very dear time out of his very busy schedule. I'm surprised he's doing it. So without further ado, let's just welcome our guest tonight, Mr. Dean Karnazes.
Yay!
I don't know after that introduction if I should feel like a legend or just feel old.
Feel like a legend, because
legend for
you,
sure.
sir, for sure. I mean, you've inspired me since the beginning. I was running. You and I have talked about this a bunch, but like, I was running marathons and 10Ks and half marathons, thinking that was it. And then, of course, your books, and people kind of like, for me, it was reading your book and realizing there was something beyond that, not just physically but also mentally, and it shaped my life. And I bet you get this a lot. I imagine you get it every day. I'm
flattered and honored every time I hear it. And I do hear it quite a bit, and it's an honor and a privilege for me to hear that. I can't think of a higher calling in my life than to have someone say what you just said. It's worth $1 million to me. So it's really fulfilling for me internally to hear you say that, and a lot of other people to say that. I don't know what the heck I've done for you to be saying these things to me, because I'm unworthy of it. But whatever gets you out and exercising and living a healthier, more adventurous life, I mean, I'm glad to contribute.
Well, for me, just to distill it down to its simplest form, it was showing me that people could do more than they think they could. Reading your books and realizing that there was another level to what the human body could endure. I know that you had been ultra running long before your first book came out, and there's a whole community of ultra runners that have been doing it for decades. So I of course know that existed, but it was like a doorway to that world. Your books allowed us to sort of enter this weird realm and then change our lives, and now we're a part of that realm. It is quite weird. So I imagine it's even weirder for you to get this probably on a regular basis.
Well, I mean, the people that say the things you just said are people that get it. We're all part of the same universe. Like, some people might pick up my book and read it and think, these people are nuts. I'm never doing anything like that in my entire life.
Sure.
Another group of people say, wow, I didn't even know this existed. I got to try it. And those are the kind of people in our universe. And, you say my books, but it's more, in my story. People would say, I love your story. Well, I think it's broader than that. It's our story, because every runner can relate to what I'm going through. I'm just telling a story that each and every one of us has been through, and it's very relatable and identifiable. So I think that's why it's so personal to people.
Yeah. I also want to just make sure that everyone knows that Kim is also here.
I'm here.
I realized I wanted to get Dean on as much as possible because he does have a heart out tonight. But
yes.
Kim, tell people what you're doing here.
As always,
besides rocking.
Rocking.
I don't know.
As always, you guys, we are live. So just a reminder, we are live. So if you have questions for Dean, please pop them in the chat room. You guys are already asking a lot of great questions in there. So
yeah, keep the questions coming. And of course, we'll get to these throughout the show tonight, as well as the post show. So Dean, let's start. As I mentioned, we've had you on the show before. People can go back and watch that episode, sort of kind of catch up with your career and what you've been up to recently. But I want to talk about Western States for you. We talked in the pre-show there, you and I, just about how the event has changed. You're one of the few people who's been able to see it, not only towards the beginning, I mean, in the 90s, but also evolve over time, because you ran it 12 times, and then this is your 13th time, correct?
This is my 13th. One of those was a winter Western States. We can talk about that further. A couple guys, Tim Tweetmeyer and Jim Finkberner, a couple of us ran it during the winter. So it's kind of an unofficial Western States, but the then race director gave us a buckle, like a commemorative buckle that he had painted snow on the tops of the mountain peaks on the buckle. So
that's
awesome. That was incredible to do the Western States Trail in January when it's just covered in snow.
Like, people talk about it even to every year of like, oh, the snow levels, is it going to be a bad snow year? And like running it in the winter is, well, yeah, it's going to be a bad snow year because it's snow, like guaranteed snow in the winter. So you have this.
For the first 30 miles, we used snowshoes. I mean, there's no way to. It was unrunnable. It was, you'd be post holing up to your waist. So we ran in snowshoes for 30 miles.
Wow. Yeah. Which do you prefer?
Oh God. Regular running without snowshoes on.
So let's talk a little bit then about how the race has evolved, because I imagine in the early days it wasn't nearly the spectacle what it is today. So for you, like, how has it changed, and in what ways good and what ways bad, I guess?
Well, here's a little prop and a poke for my book. So I wrote this book, as you know, about my Western States experience in 1994, and people read the book. I wasn't intending on people writing the book. I just wanted to write a book. It was like something I wanted to do in my life. It's kind of like write book, try skydiving, eat sushi. So I kind of checked it off the list, and the book became wildly popular, and people got exposed to this race. Subsequently, as you know, the popularity of ultra running has also boomed. Maybe partly because of my contribution, but just I think running as an activity has boomed, and ultra running even more so. So now the odds of getting into Western states are lower than the odds of getting into Harvard.
Yeah.
So I think 99% of what's happened at Western states is very positive. I think the downside is that it's so impossible for people to get in. And that's created a really interesting dynamic because, I've got a 10-time finisher buckle.
Yep.
The odds of getting one of those these days is almost impossible, not because people aren't capable of it, because there are plenty of people who are, but because it's impossible to get into the race 10 times. If you start young and you're, competitive, you might be able to get, the golden ticket for 10 years. But there's people moving up through the ranks now, as we've seen. The competitive nature of ultramarathon has completely changed, so that's
Right.
even hard to do. So when people go to Western states now, it's a big deal. Like if you're coming in from Australia to run Western states, you're bringing a crew, and it's one shot. Like this could be one and done. You're not going to DNF. I mean, I saw people suffering. I thought I was suffering. Like I've suffered worse on this race than any other race, and I thought it's really bad. Like I can't imagine it being worse. And then I'd pass someone who was worse off, and I understood that they're not going to DNF. I mean, they're going to have to get carted out of there on a stretcher because they put so much into getting to that starting line. They're unwilling to give up, and that to me was really inspirational to see that.
Yeah, that's interesting perspective. In the 90s, 94, and even probably into the early 2000s, was there even a wait list? Like, was there, or I guess a rush to register for the event? Or was it kind of one of those secret events that a handful of people knew about, and it was the ultimate challenge for this core group of ultra runners?
The first year I got in, I think it was like a 1 in 50-50 chance of getting in on the lottery. So it was pretty easy to get in on the lottery. A lot of people just got in on the lottery, and that's how I got in the first year. But there still was a lottery. It already started in 1994. They already had the lottery process going.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. And you're absolutely right. People from around the world, when they get into this thing, it's full commitment because you might only get that one chance, which is really interesting to think about. The competitive nature of the event. Let's talk a little bit about how that's evolved too, because we've had guests on in the last few weeks, especially Jim Walmsley and his whole crew, the Coconino Cowboys and everything. People who are setting records, people who are pushing the envelope, people who are calling their shots and executing this year specifically. For you, having the history with the event, was it always super competitive, or was there a much different atmosphere at that finish line for the top 10 men and women?
Yeah, it was a bit of a different atmosphere, I have to be honest. It's definitely gotten more competitive. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think it's a really exciting thing. I mean, what Jim did this year is, it was a 100-mile sprint, I like to say. I mean, the guy just laid it out, and he's either going to crash or he's going to get to the finish line. And what he pulled off was phenomenal. I mean, how exciting is that? So there's no denying the excitement of, the people that are really racing. I think to keep the grassroots spirit of Western states, given its rise and prominence, that we need not just to focus on the front runners and the competitive nature, which is very important to give that a bright shining light, but also to focus on the human interest stories at the race as well, because there's a lot of those going on as well. I would say that most of the people have no delusions they're going to end up in the top 10. It's their own race experience, and they might be tracking on the winners, or they may not even know who the winners are. They're in it for themselves. It's their unique experience. It's their experience with their crew and their pacers, and I don't think we should overlook that element. I mean, if you look at, say, Ironman, for instance, if you watch the TV coverage of Ironman, it's not just on the front runners. It's a lot of backstories and human interest stories, and I think that to get Western states to to actually getting legitimate primetime TV coverage, both of those elements need to be focused on.
I love that. I mean, we talk about stories on this show. A lot of the videos that we post to the channel and films and stuff that I make, it's like we focus on the story. And you're absolutely right. With Western states, especially, people train their whole life to try to get to that stage. And it's like 350 stories are taking place in real time at that event. Again, we are live. We got tons of live questions. Kim has pulled a bunch aside, so let's get to some of those.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions here. Question from Sean Jenkins. Sean asks, Dean, everyone has a reason for having running as a major part of their lifestyle. What is your reason?
It was Sean, right?
Sean, yes.
Yeah, Sean. I mean, I've written 4 books to try to get to that reason. I'm still not sure I nailed it, but I guess I feel most alive when I'm running. I guess if you just had to distill it down to one thing, it's just the way running makes me feel. I feel happiest. I feel most comfortable in my own skin when I'm running. In a sense, I started running to escape the memories that drinking couldn't cover up. I was becoming an alcoholic, and I lost my sister, who was like my best friend, when she was 18 years old, and it kind of sent my life into a tailspin. And I just tried to get away from it and escape those memories. And a bottle was a way to do that. On my 30th birthday, I walked out of a bar in San Francisco and just 3 sheets to the wind decided I'm going to become a runner again. I'm going to run 30 miles. And that night, I gave birth to my new life, and that life is a runner. Yeah.
Do you, now being who you are and having the business and the brand and everything sort of surrounding it, have you lost any of that love, or has it changed or shifted at all for the running aspect of things? Has it been more difficult to maintain the resume or anything like that, or is it still just that raw love of the simplicity of running?
It's still that raw love of the simplicity, and my desire to compete. I love competition, but I also love just running for the pure love of running. I think not every run has to have a quote unquote purpose. It's okay to run just because you love running. Sometimes I'll just put on a backpack, throw a cell phone in there and a credit card, and I'll go run for 10, 12 hours. I might even run overnight. I might run from my house up to Napa Valley, and I'll stop in the middle of the night and grab a latte. I'll walk when I want to walk. I'll jog. I'll shuffle. I'll sprint if I want to sprint. But I'm out there. I'm not watching my pace. I'm not watching anything. I'm just out there exploring and being adventurous. And to me, that keeps my love for running rekindled. I think that if I just focused on competition, I'd burn out. And I've seen a lot of guys that are so focused on competition that they burned out. But, I kind of lost the passion a little bit for Western states, after all those years. And now, after going back this last year, it's like rekindled and there's a huge fire burning. I mean, part of it was the race experience was so extraordinary. And the other element is that my race was so horrible that I need revenge. So, I mean, it's kind of yin and yang, but I still love it as much as the day I began.
So let's start digging in a little bit to the race this year. Obviously, you've run it multiple times. You know this course. You know the people surrounding it, the culture, the lore. I've only read that you had a terrible experience at this year's race, not with any of the race organization or any of that kind of stuff, just like physically, like you had a really bad race. How did that play out? What happened? Or I guess, when did it start? Was there a specific moment that you're like, oh, today is bad?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the weirdest experience because, I only got in with 10 days notice.
Right, because
so
you're on the wait list, right?
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of Western States specific training, but I'd been running quite a bit. And, right when I learned I got in, I signed up for the Bishop High Sierra Ultra and did great. I mean, I finished in 4th place. I felt strong. I felt like I still had a lot of gas in the tank. I thought this States is going to be, I'm thinking maybe sub 20 again, like the old days. I'm feeling strong as I ever have.
Yeah.
I could give you a laundry list of excuses. Yeah, I started getting a sore throat. My lymph nodes are swollen. I couldn't sleep at night because I invited my parents up. My dad sleeps with this thing called a CPAC on his face. And all night I'm just listening to like scuba gear gurgling all night. So I didn't sleep. But those are just excuses. I mean, everyone faces difficulties, getting to that starting line. But from the very first step, I just fell off. Like from the very first step, I'm like, why do I not feel myself? Why is my heart rate elevated? And then all of a sudden, why can I not get my heart rate elevated? People say it's hot. I've run Badwater 10 times. I mean,
Yeah.
Badwater is 25 degrees hotter. I mean, I know the heat, and I know my body responds really well to heat. This year, the heat crushed me. I did everything I usually do, and I'm just fine. This year was the opposite case. Right at that kind of halfway point where I'm thinking, I can reclaim this and do a sub 24 hour. It's not that bad. You can pull it out. You do this all the time. You regroup, you rejuvenate, and come back to life. You could do this. I was crossing El Dorado Creek and just slipped on this really slimy rock and just went down on my shin, cut my shin open, bruised my bone. And it's just another excuse on top of more excuses. And I kept pushing as hard as I could, but it was like one of those bad dreams where, your legs are moving, you're just not getting anywhere. I kept looking at my watch going, what is wrong? And that's just kind of how it went down. And finally, I just kind of embraced it. I said, you've got 30 hours to finish this. Just make a commitment. You're going to keep going for 30 hours. You might not make the cutoff. You might end up in a medic tent, but you're going to keep going for 30 hours. You're not going to pull yourself out of this race until 30 hours click. And my pacers were great. A couple dear friends of mine, Topher and Kim Gaylord. We had a great time. We had fun out there. Usually we're very, kind of combative with each other and joke around a lot. They were all game on. I mean, I saw a different side of those two. They looked at me and they said, okay, he is suffering. Let's get this guy through it. So it was really a lot of work on their behalf. I mean, they really held their own. The other thing that was somewhat magical is I got to see a lot of the course that I normally don't see because it's the middle of the night. And all of a sudden now it's the next morning, like crossing No Hands Bridge. All I usually see is a bunch of lights strewn on this bridge, and it's kind of beautiful at night. I got to see it during the day this year, which was fantastic. And the other thing, the last 1.3 miles of the course, you're on the road in the back streets of Auburn. When I got to Roby Point this year, it was Sunday morning, and there was a lot of people out on the course. Just the people that live in the neighborhood had set up beach chairs, and they're out cheering the runners on. And that was a dynamic. Usually it's the middle of the night. There might be one or two people around. There's I just run by, and so there's some glory in it. Yeah, there's some good elements in it.
As I've documented the race a number of times in different people's runs there, and that was one thing that I noticed was when you follow the front runners and the front of the pack, Forest Hill is mayhem. It's you arrive and it's awesome, but it's chaos. But what you don't see is when they're finishing at 2 or 3 in the morning is that the whole last 20 miles are quiet and there's no one out there, and you even get to the track and there's a smattering of people there maybe. But I also have documented people who finish the next morning and it comes alive again. There's people from Roby Point on. So for you, who's finished this race across the spectrum in time-wise, sub 20, just over 20, this year you got to experience something a little bit different. Did you prefer it this year, having this experience, or would you have preferred to have that sub 20 absolute raucous, great run, Dean Karnazes style?
In hindsight, I think the former. I think I'm glad that things turned out the way they did. I've never worked so hard for a Western States buckle. Literally. I mean, the other buckles have not been that hard for me to earn. This one was really hard. The other thing, you'd have to shadow me during this race, but I have a weird life. I mean, I'd show up at these aid stations and people would pull out copies of books. They'd have magazines for me to sign. People would want to do selfies. I've had, for some people, I've had kind of a profound impact on their life. And here I am in flesh and blood. They're tracking on me. They know I'm going to be there, and they want to take a photo. They want me to sign their book. So it's just kind of weird. I'm just dying out there, and I want to be in my own headspace. And I'm surrounded by people. Hey, can you sign this for me? Can you autograph this? Can you kiss my baby? God, I have a weird life. Yeah, a weird and beautiful life. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously I'd be one of those people who'd be fangirling out and like, Dean, I need to have this moment with Dean right here. You're at mile 70, I know, but man, thank you so much. But I can imagine for you that had to have been difficult. If you're going through what you just said was like one of the roughest races of your life, that's got to be hard to like turn on the thanks, I really appreciate that. Like, how did you manage to juggle that? Did you ever just blatantly tell someone, listen, I'm about to puke, or I'm going to pass out, I need you to step 2 feet back, or any of that kind of stuff? Like, how did it go down?
Yeah, I know. I just don't have that in my nature. I mean, I think it's so wonderful that I've had an impact on someone's life like that. I think I owe it to them. I have a responsibility to give something back. And part of my problem is that I never look that bad. Like I was feeling horrible, and when I look at some of the photos throughout the course of the day, like I'm always smiling. I've always got color in my skin. I'm like, how do I look good when I'm actually feeling so shitty? So, yeah. It is what it is. Yeah.
Well, I will say it's also that Greek skin. It's that like perfect glow year round. Yeah. If I rolled in feeling bad, it's like
you'd look like a ghost.
Well, you'd see through me. It's like transparent ginger skin. To be like, oh God, Ethan's terrible. This is bad. Again, we are live. Lots of live questions. Let's get to a couple here.
Yeah, a question from Jesse in the chat room. Jesse asks, Dean, you're an inspiration to so many runners. Who do you look to for inspiration?
Wow. I mean, I look to so many people, but I'll look to one person in particular that was there at Western States, and her name is Ann Trayson. You guys know who Ann is. The whole world should know who Ann is, but they don't. And even a lot of the younger runners now don't know who Ann Trayson is. She's a legend. I mean, she dominated Western States. She dominated every race she was in, basically. And, then she started not dominating, and then she went away. She just went dark. Like, you never heard from Ann Trayson. And I thought it's such a pity, because here's this incredible athlete and she's got so much to share and give. Well, Ann has reemerged. And this new Ann, I think, is even better. She's more playful. She just is out there to enjoy the experience. She doesn't even run. She like fast hikes and walks, but she's there and she participates. And she was at an aid station at mile 24, and she just was great to me. I mean, she totally took care of me. She had her pit crew just put ice on me, do everything you need to do to help someone out. And then she walked with me down the trail and like talked strategy. So I really look up to her, both for her competitive nature and also for coming back and just being that personality and that warm human that she is. She's still weird and eccentric, but I love her, and everyone else does as well. Yeah.
We've met her a handful of times, but we had her on the show recently, and it was like our first chance to actually get to talk to her. If you have not, if you're maybe new to this show and maybe watching this for the first time, or even if you've watched it a bunch, go back and watch the Ann Trayson episode, because it's the most interesting conversation I feel like I and you have had on the show since episode 1. It was odd and
great.
Inspiring and honest. Yeah, your description of her is amazing, and I know that you know her from back in the day. She's a 14-time Western States finisher. She's got that many cougars in her house, the cougar statues and stuff. So she's just incredible. So yeah, for you, were there moments that you can pull out of this race that you remember as being helpful, or like basically, were there any aid stations or interactions that helped you get to that finish line, like moments that you could pick out?
Well, I mean, as anyone who runs Western States, you can remember every single moment of the race. So it's imprinted on your mind. I don't know why this happens, but I remember everything from the very first step. And we could spend an entire interview of me talking about people that were so kind to me along the way, and people I chatted with. I mean, you become friends with people on the trail. You misery loves company, as the saying goes. So you kind of connect with people that are in that same state of mind you are, and you run for 10 or 15 minutes or 10 or 15 miles together, and you share something. And I did that with a lot of different runners, and a lot of them have reached out to me afterward and thanked me and sent me stuff. So there's just a great community in ultra running, especially when you're suffering. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. There's that shared suffering. Everyone knows when you're going through it. Let's get to some live questions. Go for it, Kim.
Sure. Question from Nathaniel. Nathaniel asks, Dean, are there times when you find your Are there times when you find your reputation can lead to challenging or possibly unrealistic expectations?
Yeah, and that's kind of the hardest thing for me to reconcile because, um, an image and a brand is it can be larger than life, and a lot of people just see this person, whoever he is, as invincible, just dominating constantly, and it's just not reality. And so, I mean, I could tell I'm kind of a benchmark, I could tell as I'm running. I mean, some people are saying, "Oh, it's great to see Dean," and kind of snickering, "Oh, my runner's ahead of Dean." It happens all the time. And I mean, even in ridiculous things like, fun runs, like 10K fun runs, people like start racing with me, at a fun run, just to just say, "Oh, I beat Dean," he's nothing. So, that can be a little humiliating, also a little humbling. But yeah, I think still, the only person I have to answer to is the person I see in the mirror every morning. And as long as I'm living up to my own expectations of myself, I've got to be satisfied with that. And every runner is going to face a moment where they're all of a sudden not on top and people are beating them. And I think the measure of a champion is, what do they do at that time? How do they respond when they're not on top, always dominating anymore? And how do they either stay engaged or disengaged? And I've just chosen to stay engaged.
I think that's one of the coolest things. I'm really glad that you said that, Dean. I've had people race me in the last 10 yards of a race where I'm just like, why are you doing this?
Like a race recently, you actually had somebody call you out and say like, "Oh, I can't let the ginger runner beat me," or something like that.
Yeah, they were like bonking at mile 28 of a 50K, and I was running great, and I ran by them. They're like, "I can't let the ginger runner beat me." So in the last 10 feet, they like ran in front of me, and I was like, "Take it, I don't care. Like, I'm here to have an experience." So I can imagine what it's like for you, a much larger person in this sport. But I also love that you're able to you're growing with the sport is also growing with you, and it is still a part of your life, and you're still influencing people, whether you know it or not, or whether it sounds like people are still telling you this, but it's obviously continuing to seep into the culture here in the sport. I love it. I'm really glad that you just said that. Let's get to another live question.
Yeah, a question from Deb in the chat room. Deb asked, "Dean, you have completed so many epic races and adventures. What stands out at the top for you?"
Oh, again, we could spend another entire interview. I mean, I've run on all 7 continents twice. So, I mean, I've run a marathon to the South Pole. I've run across the Sahara Desert. I've run across the Gobi, Atacama. Incredible races and exotic and incredible places. But I mean, still the pinnacle of my racing career was a 10K I did. And that's because I ran with my daughter, Alexandria, on her 10th birthday. And, nothing will ever surpass that. It was, for a father, I mean, that's it. That was the pinnacle race of my career. Yeah. But I will say that, people say, "What's the toughest ultramarathon you've ever run?" And I say, raising a teenage daughter. Oh my God, she's gonna kill me too. The 10K was great, but the aftermath, oh man, boys and geez, I'm not ready for this.
I imagine there's a lot of lessons from ultra running that you can take into your real life, to your like family life and stuff like that. Are there lessons that you've learned in ultra running that have helped you in the other facets of your life?
Oh, I mean, inevitably, running teaches us so many things about, perseverance, overcoming obstacles, dealing with hardship. But I think it teaches us that we're better than we think we are, and we can go further than we think we can. And I think, to hear about someone running a 50-kilometer race or a 50-mile or a 100-mile race is so expansive when you first hear it. You can't wrap your head around it. I mean, I remember the first time I heard about a 100-mile foot race, I thought, all right, well, how many days does it take? And, where are the campgrounds or the hotels? Where do you stop along the way? And the guy just said, no. The gun goes off and you start running and you don't stop till you get to the finish line. And I said, well, where do you sleep? He looks at me like, what do you mean sleep? And I just thought, a human can't do that. Like, that's impossible. And then when I did it, I just said, wow, you are better. You're made of more than what you really realize. And ultra running shows you that.
It really strips you down and just shows you what you're really, truly capable of and beyond. I mean, it opened up an entirely new door for me. What I thought, I mean, it's weird to have Dean on the show is one thing, but to also like kind of reminisce of or talking to the guy that helped influence my life changes. And also, I mean, Ginger Runner Live wouldn't exist if I wasn't an ultra runner.
Yeah.
This whole everything, all the films that I made, I wouldn't have realized that this is what I love and this is what I want to do. It's amazing. It's amazing to be able to like talk to you.
Yeah, and didn't we first meet on running the Big Sur Marathon, like on course? I think we were running Big Sur, and you just said, "Hey, I just got to talk to you because
it was
was it Big Sur?
It was definitely Big Sur. That was the first time that I actually like had the courage to talk to you. We actually met at maybe it was Big Sur because I think it was Big Sur. It's on video, you guys. You can go back and watch it because I remember videotaping it and like running with Dean, and the whole time I was like,
I had to call security. Yeah.
I was like, I'm running with Dean, but I forget if.
But didn't Dean also do like the?
Yeah, but you were also you were doing a double. So let's be honest here. Dean was on his second marathon of the day, and I was running along with Dean, just like fangirling out. I keep saying fangirling. I could say fanboying.
Your boy.
But yeah. Regardless, I remember running my first ultra, which was the North Face San Francisco, and I forget when the Big Sur, and they might have been the same year or whatever. But I remember talking to you before that. I was very nervous. There were huge storms that rolled through. This was 2012, really big storm year.
That was a muddy year.
It was pretty nasty.
Slip and slide, yeah.
And I remember talking to you beforehand, very briefly, just like, hey, Dean, I'm doing this because I read your book and didn't think it was possible. I'm really scared of the storms and are we going to survive? And I think your answer was, oh, yeah, you'll be fine. Have fun out there. Like, it was so simple. It was just like, oh, yeah. We're here to have fun, and that kind of has led me to where we are now. Like the whole point of this whole thing, and even doing this show and talking with you now, almost 8 years later, is like it's just about fun. It's just about having fun. Again,
well, I mean, I think our definition of fun might be a little bit different than most people's.
We have to caveat. No, totally.
We would consider running an ultra marathon fun, and I mean, there are moments where it is kind of your typical funness, like you're laughing with people, but there's a lot of pain involved, but we still view it as fun. Like most people wouldn't, say something that is painful is actually fun, but we define it as being fun. So I don't think fun actually has to be fun.
Yeah. Like I realized that was there any time during Western States when you were suffering, when you were having not a great day, when you regretted either running that race or do you ever doubt like, oh God, why did I choose to do this? And that choice, like the idea of that this was a choice. Did you ever have thoughts like that during States?
No, I really didn't. Not even one. I just said, you know what, embrace it for what it is. I mean, it's an incredible day, and you're doing something that 99.9% of the population cannot do or can't even relate to. Like, it's a privilege for you to be here and for your body to be able to do this. Make the best of what you've got. I didn't have a lot, but I tried to use that diminished capacity to do the best I could. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's get to one more live question, and then we're going to talk to Dean a little bit about just general fitness and how that's also great for ultra running, and also his new book.
Sure. Question from Nathaniel. Nathaniel says, from running to writing and everything in between, what do you think is your greatest contribution to the sport, and why?
Well, I don't know if it's just one single thing. I mean, I realized that I could do what I do in a vacuum, and it probably wouldn't. It would be just more like, it'd just be for Dean. It'd be almost selfish. But if I wrote books, if I did interviews, if I was, on TV, that it would be a bigger story, and it would bring more people into it. It'd be about something bigger than just me. And I think I'm most proud of that. I think, some people say, wow, your publicist is doing such a great job. Like, you're such a brilliant, marketing PR guy. I'm like, I don't have a publicist. I'm really not that brilliant. I mean, I just have done what I thought would be something I enjoy doing. If an interview came my way that I thought would be enjoyable to do, I did it. And I think that that element, other people coming into the sport and telling me that I influence them on some level, I think that's my biggest contribution. Yeah.
That's awesome. And like I said earlier, you're going to continue to influence the sport. Obviously, not just in book form, but hearing stories of you running Western States in 2018 and having a terrible day, but still getting it done. Like, that story is going to help inspire those who are out there having a rough day. And like, well, Dean managed to push through, and everyone has a rough day. So who am I to complain? Let's just keep moving forward, one foot in front of the other.
And I mean, I define my, my stopping point as a pine box. I mean, I'm not going to stop until I'm, 10 feet under. There's a quote that I really admire, and it's, find what you love and let it kill you. And I think I'm just living that quote.
I love it. I don't go anywhere though, Dean. Like, stick around for a long time. I want to point out Road to Sparta. Dean's most recent book is a fantastic read, as all of his books are. If you have not gotten it, it kind of details a lot of the history, but also Dean's running of the Spartathlon. There it is. Dean even has one. I loved it, man. Like, this was a great travel book for me. This was something I took along on our recent movie tour with Where Dreams Go to Die. I was reading this almost every plane ride or car trip or any of that sort of thing, pulling out the pages. It's a dynamic read. It just keeps you going, keeps you entertained. What was it like to write this one compared to the other books? Did it flow really easily, or were you thinking about the book as you were running the Spartathlon, or how did it sort of unfold for you?
It was definitely a different project than any of my other books, in that I worked with a historian, Professor Paul Cartledge from Cambridge University, who's like one of the foremost authorities on ancient Greek culture. So, reading Herodotus, reading Homer, reading a lot of the ancient Greek manuscripts and texts, and trying to pluck out nuggets that related to running and the Battle of Marathon, and what actually happened with the original marathoner, Phidippides or Pheidippides. So it was I really got into it. Like, I started geeking out on, wow, this is there's more to this story than some guy just running, supposedly 26.2 miles and dying. I mean, this is a richer story, and let's call this out, because I think it gives deeper meaning to running in general. And anyone who's run a marathon, I mean, I think you ought to be damn proud, because you've done something that is lore. I mean, it was, a precedent that basically saved democracy. I mean, if you look at what happened with the Battle of Marathon. So it was an important book for me to write. It hasn't been my best-selling book. And I don't think it's maybe that sexy. Like, people see the title and they're not sure what it is. I don't think I nailed the title, but it's gotten the best reviews. So people that have read it have said, wow, this is a really great book, well written and everything else. So I'm proud that that it's gotten great reviews, and I'm proud of the book itself. But if you haven't picked up a copy, it's kind of timeless. Like, you can read it. You can read it today, and it had the same impact as when it was first published a couple years ago.
Yeah, the history side of things was one thing I really liked about it, and it delves. You get more detail than I was expecting. It actually felt a lot like The Perfect Mile. The Perfect Mile is much more of like, here's all the specific nuances in the history of these individuals who ran, the sub 4 mile and stuff. But getting that historical element really helped. I don't know, give it a full-fledged history to the story. So it was great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I highly recommend anyone who's a fan of Dean's books, definitely check it out. It's his most recent one, The Road to Sparta. You can find it, I'm guessing, everywhere. People can find it.
It's in bookstores, it's online, yeah.
So let's get to one more live question, and then we're going to move into the post show. Sure. Every week we have our guests stick around for an additional 5 or 10 minutes for our Patreon subscribers. We have a lot of questions that get asked during the main show. It's more one-on-one. It's a more intimate audience. So if you have not, consider joining us at patreon.com/thegingerrunner for as little as $1 a month. You basically get access to all of our post shows in real time and the archived episodes as well. And that will include tonight. So if you join Patreon tonight, you'll get to join us for the post show with Dean here in just a couple of seconds. But I think you should join. I think you should join, people. Well, take it from Dean.
Yeah.
Well worth
the investment. Yeah.
It's like a fraction.
Just while we were talking about the book, Ian Hurley from earlier on in the show had a comment and a question saying, Dean, I loved Road to Sparta. Do you plan on doing any more speaking events about the book?
Yeah, I mean, I put my calendar online. So, when I go to marathons and so forth, I always speak at the expo. You can just go on to, ultramarathonman.com and see my schedule, Ian, and I appreciate it. I've got a very interactive presentation I think is really nice because it's got photos, more slides of the Spartathlon itself. So I kind of tell the story of this race in kind of a multimedia sort of way. So hopefully we'll connect at one of these.
Awesome. Okay, so cool. Before we actually go to the post show, I am going to do something that we do normally with first time guests on the show. Dean has been on the show before. I think we did it. I mean, it's been a long time. I think we did it way back when, but because it has been so long, I want to redo this little segment. It's called the Quickie Question Quiz. I have a series of about 10 very easy questions. And Dean, it's rapid fire. So basically, you answer with the first thing that comes to your brain. You let me know when you're ready by just giving me a thumbs up, and we'll just start going through the Quickie Question Quiz.
I remember this from last time. I got to be careful what I say. Yeah,
they're very easy. Okay,
let's do it. Yeah.
What was your very first race?
It was a mile in junior high school in 7th grade, and I set the state record. It was 4 minutes and 58 seconds in 7th grade.
Wow.
Jeez. That was like, that's the end of the quiz.
That was the fastest mile I've ever run my whole life.
That's amazing. Favorite place to run currently?
In Marin County, where I live. I mean, it's always best in your own backyard. So right here at home.
Road or trails?
Definitely trails. Yeah. I mean, I'll run on road, trail, mud, snow, even water, but I definitely prefer the trails. Yeah.
Current bucket list race?
Ooh, dare I say it? I want to try Barclays. I mean, come on, everyone! It's so fascinating. I got to try that race sometime in my life. So
there was a lot of questions about that in the chat room.
That's awesome. I actually was not what I expected, but that is.
Did I just say? Can you delete this out when you actually put it live? Right. Anyone who considers himself a legit ultra marathoner has got to try Barclays. Yeah.
Favorite running movie?
Ooh, wow. Probably a movie called Into the Wind. And you guys, I don't know if you've seen this. It's a documentary about Terry Fox. So it's an ESPN. You ought to see it. It's one of the 30 ESPN documentaries. Terry Fox, who's the famous cancer, well, I would say survivor, but I don't want to give away the story, who had a above knee amputation, and this is back in the 70s, and set out to run across Canada. Mm-hmm. And the reason it's called Into the Wind is because he chose to run from the East Coast to the West. And I've done that across the United States. You're running into a headwind the whole way. So it is the most, it's a tearjerker, but it's beautiful. So Into the Wind, yeah.
I think we watched that years ago. Kim's Canadian.
Terry Fox is like
Canadian.
a
legend. Yeah.
No, Terry Fox is,
yeah.
So go check it out if you haven't already, of course. Guilty pleasure TV show?
Oh, Shark Tank.
Nice.
I'm kind of drawn.
There we go.
There's another show. I got it. Naked and Afraid.
These
are good
awesome
answers.
You got to be on that show. I was gonna say, Dean, you got to do it.
I don't think I have the courage to be on that show. I really admire these people. Like, I don't think I could just boot up in front of someone and just do that. But it's.
Well, for the live viewers, Dean's not wearing pants. You can't see below the camera. Actually, none of us are. This show is naked. Welcome to Naked and Afraid.
Naked and Unafraid, yeah.
Right.
What was your pre-race meal before Western States?
I had a piece of wild sardines, actually. Wild Planet Foods, a company I work with, makes sardines. So I had a can of sardines and a salad. And people say, what do you eat in the morning? I don't eat before races. I never do eat before races. So I go into it fasting. I kind of have done the keto adapted diet. So that's where that's at. Yeah.
What was the first post-race indulgence?
This is going to sound crazy because I haven't had one of these in years. I had what's it called? A burrito supreme from Taco Bell. Oh my God!
All
Why
right.
don't I eat those more often? I mean, I'm paleo, so I don't even eat dough, and here I am, mowing this thing. I didn't just have one; I had two. I ordered one.
You earned it.
Ate it, and we're driving away. I'm like, we got to go back to the drive-thru.
I love that.
Love
And
it, yeah.
the final question of the Quickie Question Quiz is, what are your current running shoes? I have a feeling that they might be the same things that you ran Western States in.
Well, I got to preface this by saying I'm sponsored by the North Face.
Mm-hmm.
So I run in North Face shoes. And I know that some of the North Face athletes use other brands of shoes. But I feel like I need to support the brand. The North Face shoes are evolving. I don't want to diss them entirely. They're better than they used to be. But I ran in North Face shoes. Yeah.
Nice. I think it was the Endurance TR or Endurance TR.
Endurance, yeah.
Yeah, which another former Marin
yeah.
resident, Dylan Bowman, also I believe helped put some stuff into.
Yep, I spent some time with him at the start up in Squaw Valley.
I was gonna say, I think he was there for a little bit. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, you passed, Dean. You passed A+. Congratulations,
Hey.
Quickie Question Quiz. So remind people who are watching live before we go into the post show. We're only going to keep you for a little bit in the post show, but remind people where they can find you on social media and stuff like that if they have residual questions and all that good stuff.
I just feel so funny reminding people like how to find me. I mean, just Google Dean Karnazes and you can see my website. I'm pretty active on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So yeah, just Google my name.
Do it. Thank you, Dean, so much for joining us tonight and for coming back on Ginger Runner Live, talking to us just a little bit about the Western States run this year. We're going to move into the post show here. So once again, go to Patreon.
But before we do that, let me thank you guys. I mean, come on, 217 episodes. That's insane. I mean, think about
it's been a long time.
The goodness you've spread, though. It's been a long time. You've got great endurance, and your audience is continuing to grow. So, bravo. Yeah.
Thank you, Dean. And again, like we would not be doing this. We would not be here if it wasn't for your stories and for your constant inspiration and to show us a sport that is a little bit crazy, but has showed us what humans can do. And the stories that we get to share on this show and that we get to hear from guests like you and the audience, like the live viewers tonight, all have a very unique story. And it's really, as I'm guaranteed you can attest, it's amazing to hear them on a regular basis. Everyone has a unique story, and it's crazy to hear.
Inspiration is a two-way street. I mean, people say I inspire them, but it's reciprocated. I mean, I hear stories. I mean, one of your top donors, he lost 100 pounds. Come on.
Yeah.
People tell me that like I used to be 150 pounds heavier, and I look at him, and I'm like, that's incredible. You ought to write a book. Like, how do and they're going to run a marathon. Like, how do you do this? I've never faced any sort of hardship like that. So some of the stories are incredible.
Agreed. Totally. Thank you very much, Dean, our guest tonight. Make sure you follow him on social if you have not or are not already. Go grab his most recent book, The Road to Sparta, or any of his books. Give them as gifts during the holidays, all that good stuff. We're going to move right into the post show. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight live. We are Monday at 6 p.m. every Monday. We are live on Mondays at 6 p.m. every Monday. And you can join us for our post shows also every Monday by going to patreon.com/thegingerrunner for as little as $1. That's pretty much it. Get out there, guys. Train hard, race harder, and part of the hardest. I know I am. Am I forgetting anything?
That's it.
All right. Cool, guys. We'll
Thanks,
see
guys.
you in the post show, or we'll see you next week. Cool. Bye.
Bye.